Before you begin work on the springs, make sure to bring all necessary tools and equipment into the unit before operation, since the door must be down in order to work on the springs. The door is not impossible to move, but highly inconvenient. Since the door has a broken spring, there will be less tension on the curtain, making the door harder to lift and impeding the curtain from wrapping around the shaft. This means that when you close the door, you may need to push the unwound curtain over the shaft with one hand while pulling on the bottom of the door with the other. Before working on the springs, you'll need a support in place for the spring shaft. We use a 2x4 with a V-notch in one end. You can either put a notch in a board longer than the height of the shaft, then cut it to fit, or you can adapt a smaller board by bracing the notched board against the shaft, measuring the gap, and screwing another board on, which will extend the notched board. To maximize stability, add another 2x4 at a 45-degree angle. Once the support is assembled, set it to the side while you remove the curtain door. In order to detach the door curtain, you must first release some tension from the springs. This is done using 2 pipe wrenches. These function similarly to winding bars on a normal torsion spring system. Caution: do not remove the screws without first removing the tension. Use the first wrench and make an 1/8 turn. Then use the other wrench for another 1/8 turn, and brace the wrench against the door. It may be necessary to place a piece of wood between the wrench and the door to prevent the wrench from denting or damaging the door. Then remove the screws holding the door to the drums. Have the other wrench ready when you remove the last screw. Hold the door as you remove the last screw to prevent it springing back. Next, you'll need to release the tension. Make a mark where the screws go, and count the number of turns as you unwind the springs. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now take the support beam and put it in place to prop up the end where you're removing the spring. To remove the spring, you'll first need to remove the bracket. First, pull out the cotter pin on the end of the shaft, and remove the washer. Then remove the bolt attaching the spring to the bracket. Next, remove the bolts attaching the bracket to the track. Be careful not to drop the track bolts as they can fall on the other side of the curtain door. Then, unbolt the bracket from the wall. Once the bracket is removed, the support will be carrying the weight of the shaft and may lean away from the wall, so be ready to steady it. Remove the bolt holding the spring to the drum, and remove the old spring. Before installing the new spring, check the wind and number of coils to make sure the springs are the same. This is a right wind spring, which goes on the right-hand side of the door. Take the new spring and slide it onto the shaft. Run the bolt through the loop on the spring and through the smallest hole on the drum. Secure with a nut and tighten. Then slide the bracket back onto the shaft, replace the washer and pin, then bolt it back onto the wall, and to the track. Run the other bolt through the loop on the spring, and stretch the spring to run the bolt into the smallest hole on the bracket. As you tighten the bolt, make sure the spring is lined up over the tabs on the bracket. Move the support to the other side, and repeat. Remove the pin, washer, and bolts attaching the spring to the bracket on one end and the drum on the other. Then remove the bracket from the wall and slide off the pieces of the broken spring. Then check the wind and the coils and slide the spring into place. Bolt the spring to the drum, reattach the bracket, and replace the washer and pin. Then bolt the bracket to the wall and to the track. Then bolt the other end of the spring to the bracket. Once both springs are installed, you're ready to wind the springs, the same number of turns that you released. Keeping your head out of the path of the wrenches, grip the shaft with wrench number 1 and raise it a quarter turn. Then grip the shaft with the second wrench, hold the tension with wrench 2 as you release the first wrench, and then raise the second wrench a quarter turn. Repeat this until you have the necessary number of turns. Once the springs are fully wound, place a solid piece of wood between the door and the wrench. This will hold the tension on the springs while dispersing the force on the door. Pull the curtain door down against the drums and line up with the screw holes. You may need to slightly adjust the turns on the door to make them line up. Once they're aligned, run the screws in with a screwdriver rather than a drill or an impact driver, as this prevents them from stripping. Clamp the track to prevent the door from rising in case you have put too much tension on the springs. Then remove the wrench. You're now ready to test the operation of the door. For further information on balancing the door, please follow the link below. If the door opens properly, all that is left is to grease the shaft where it connects to the bracket. We hope this has been helpful. Thank you for watching.